Hello, I'm going to go over the bleeding and shock skill demo for you. This is what we're going to do as we're treating a patient who has a severe bleed. So we're going to talk a little bit about doing the actual bleeding control using a tourniquet, and then also improvising a tourniquet. So the first thing that I'm going to show you is this tourniquet. Tourniquet is used to control bleeding in a severe extremity bleed that is uncontrolled, and it allows you to cut off complete blood supply to that extremity. And it is something that if you have really bad arterial bleeding and you're not able to get the bleeding controlled, you put the tourniquet on. There's a couple different locations. It should be minimum of 2 to 3 inches above the wound. And some areas are saying also just go right higher up on the extremity. So you could do either one. The trick is, are you able to control the bleeding and get it to stop? So a tourniquet, this is one brand that's a commercially available CAT tourniquet. It's got Velcro on it. The Velcro goes through the loop like this. And when you put it on the person, you pull it as absolutely tight as you can with the tourniquet itself. So you want to cinch it up as if you were tying super tight. And then after that's as absolutely tight as you can get it, then you have this thing called a windlass, and that you keep turning until it cuts off the bleeding. So once the bleeding stops, then you put it right in this area right there, and that will hold the windlass from coming undone, and that will be the commercially available tourniquet. If you don't have one of those and you have to improvise, you can use one of the cravats that you have, or you could use a belt or something like that, but it needs to be wide. You don't want to use a shoelace. And then with this, you're going to tie it around and then use an object such as a marker, or I'm using a pen light that you can twist, a stick, a screwdriver, anything like that. So I will demonstrate how that is done in a moment here. So for your skill test that you do, you're going to be given a scenario that you have to control the bleeding. So you'll get there. Your first step, I'm going to put on my gloves, and I'm just going to act this out as if I was testing. So the person's bleeding. I'm going to put on my gloves, and we'll say that it's this arm right here that's bleeding. So I'm going to, gloves are on. I'm going to do direct pressure so I get a dressing. In this case, I'm using Kleenex. You can use Kleenex, paper towel, a napkin from home. If you have a real first aid kit, you can use gauze. Just don't use toilet paper, it disintegrates. So I'll take this, I'm going to cover it. The wound continues to bleed. I'm going to put an additional dressing on there. If it continues to bleed, now I know I have a severe bleed, and I need to put on the tourniquet. So I will do the improvised tourniquet because that's the same kind of equipment that you have at home. You can do that. So we have this direct pressure. I'm going to take the tourniquet. I want to go above the site of the wound at least 2 to 3 inches, if not higher up on the wound. And I'm just going to tie an X there really tight. Then I'll take my marker. I'll tie the other half as if you were tying your shoe. Tie that tight. Once that's tight, we're going to turn it until bleeding is controlled. So I'm going to keep twisting and twisting and twisting till the bleeding is controlled, which the bleeding is now controlled. And I'll take this end, I'll go around the object. This end is going to also go around. So I kind of wrap it around like that, around the arm, and then I could tie it together with a square knot. That controls the bleeding. I stopped it. That's the improvised tourniquet. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I want to actually bandage the wound. So I'm going to bandage it, tuck in my loose ends. I grab my gauze to cover the wound. Now take my roller bandage and I will cover that wound. Bleeding has already been controlled with a tourniquet. I can now do this. Make sure it's covered completely. You can see my earlier video on how to bandage a wound if you need help with that. Next step in this testing process is I get it dressed. I want to then, I'm told that he has signs of hypoperfusion or shock. So he's got signs of shock. At that point, I want to call 911 because it was a severe cut. And I will now get him that. I'm also going to treat for shock by laying him down. And I'm going to cover with a blanket. Put the blanket over him. Also tuck it underneath him because we want to keep it warm. Ground takes your body heat away. So we'll do that. So we've got blanket underneath, blanket on top, and I'm going to keep an eye on his airway, breathing, and circulation. And that is the bleeding control station with a little bit of discussion about tourniquet and how to improvise a tourniquet. Hope that helps. If you have any questions, send me or Briz a message, and we wish you the best.